It is now in order to consider amendment number 23, printed in Part D of House Report 118-216. For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 23, printed in Part D of House Report number 118-216, offered by Mr. Ogles of Tennessee.
Pursuant to House Resolution 723, the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Ogles, and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Tennessee for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When we fund specific programs, we should ask ourselves one question: what is the real return on investment? In the case of the Peace Corps, we're spending a little over $410 million. Is the investment worth it, given the rising cost of food and gas? Is it appropriate for Congress to prioritize the Peace Corps over our veterans? Prioritize the Peace Corps over securing our border? And keep in mind, my proposed cut is a modest cut. So how is the Peace Corps justifying its budget in light of financial hardships borne by millions of Americans today? In separate testimonies before the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, Carol Svan, the Peace Corps director, pointed out the agency's work on the following: helping illegals at the southern border, promoting DEI amongst its volunteers, promoting COVID-19 vaccinations in low-income areas, climate change adaptation, just to name a few. In the latter case, the Peace Corps is working to promote climate-smart approaches in agriculture and to focus on gender equity issues. It's clear the Peace Corps has become more of an activist organization than an organization determined to help people. Mr. Chairman, I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. For what purpose does the gentlewoman seek recognition?
I rise in opposition to this amendment.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, the Peace Corps is one of the best investments in public diplomacy that we make, and there is no way that Democrats have prioritized Peace Corps over veterans. We support our veterans. We support the Peace Corps. What better ambassadors do we have than young American people willing to spend 2 years overseas and building goodwill with people around the world? Now, I know many of us have met these young people when traveling overseas or have discussed with our own constituents after they have participated in this life-changing experience. The Peace Corps count in this bill is already 20 million below its current level, endangering the return of volunteers in the field after COVID and the reopening of new sites, particularly in the Pacific Islands, where strong American diplomacy is sorely needed. Cuts are already threatening the ability to support the 5,000 volunteers across 51 countries that Peace Corps has responsibility for. Once again, Democrats support the Peace Corps. Democrats support and thank our veterans for their service. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, best investments? This is the best we can do? How about we invest in our veterans? How about we invest in our border? How about we take care of America? And look, I want to help those around the world, but not at the expense of Americans. And it should be noted that the Peace Corps has a long and sordid history of covering up sexual abuse of its participants. Think about that. Are we going to aid and abet an agency, an organization that has this sordid past while our veterans suffer, while our border is open, while we have migrants being abused on the border? I should think not. This is a modest cut. It simply returns the funding back to pre-COVID levels, merely a $14 million cut. We can do this. And at a time when Americans are suffering, at a time when interest rates are high, gas has gone up, food is more expensive, surely we put Americans, hardworking Americans, first. Mr. Chairman, I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman is recognized.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm not so sure that our veterans would appreciate being used as a pawn in this game to try to defund and cut funding for young people. I've talked to many veterans who appreciate the Peace Corps and appreciate the work that they're doing to help ensure that Americans have the best ambassadors in the world. Our veterans would not want to hear this pawn game being played against them in support and in opposition to the Peace Corps. I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields. The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I would argue that the Gold Star families would like for us to invest in our veterans. I would argue the veterans that are homeless would like for us to invest in our veterans. When we look at the suicide rates among our servicemen and women, we should be investing in our veterans. And so to say that putting our veterans first is using them as a pawn is offensive. Mr. Chairman, I thank you. I ask my colleagues to support this. I ask that we put our veterans and our Americans first. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Tennessee. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. For what purpose does the gentlewoman seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I ask for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Tennessee will be postponed.